Alright, so today we're focusing on evaluating a function at a specific point. We're going to practice this a lot. But we're going to first remind you a bunch of different things. First off, what is a function? So on A, the way we check for a function is we kind of use a vertical line test. So we take our vertical line and we are checking at A. So let's go to where A starts. And we just draw a bunch of vertical lines. Do we ever hit A more than once on any one of those vertical lines? No. So A is in fact a function, as it says over here. So on B, we do the same thing. So we look and we see, is there anywhere on B that if we draw a vertical line, that we hit it more than once? The answer is no. I mean, yes, it is a function because we do not cross more than once. So then let's do that on C. And I draw a vertical line on C and it touches the entire function. So I guess it's not a function, so no. Right? That's how you do, is it a function or not? You just go through with your vertical line and see if you cross more than one point. So here we're going to do domain. This is x values. So A, if you look at the x values of A, goes from -5 to 1. Alright? So let's go ahead and look at B. If you notice about B, we have an arrow pointing to the left, so that's -infinity. And then we have an open circle here at 4. So that's going all the way to 4, and it's an open circle, so it gets a parenthesis. So on A, it was closed circles for both because it was only there. Now domain for C is kind of tricky because domain on C uses only this point right here. So that's only at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And it's included on 8, so we would just use a little box like that. Okay, let's look at range now. So range is y values. Now y values on A, now remember they're both closed circles, so they're going to get brackets, is from 1 to 7. 1 being the lowest point, 7 being the highest point. So we're going to do the same thing for B. So if we look at B, we have an arrow pointing this way, which is in the down direction. So that's going to be -infinity down. And then the highest point on B is going to be this -1. And it has an open circle, so it gets a parenthesis. Now on C, this one's a little different on range than it was on domain. On C, we'll notice we have a lowest point and a highest point. So our lowest point is -1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's with an open circle, so it gets a parenthesis. And then the highest point is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 with a closed circle, so it gets a bracket. Okay, so that was our quick review on function, is it a function, domain, and range. So how can you tell if something qualifies as a function? It's if the domain values x values don't have more than one y value. In other words, x's don't repeat. Okay, now let's talk about something very specific, and you guys have seen this several times this semester, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it now. So what is the difference between y and f of x? Honestly, there is a very subtle difference between the two, but for the purposes of this class, there is no difference. So we can just say y is the same as f of x. F of x is just giving it a title, okay? Some of this call this like fancy, and this is non-fancy. Y is just a function of x, okay? So here's a function. So let's use function notation to do these problems. So here, they took their -2, they plugged it into their function, and they got out a -3. So here we're going to take a -1, we're going to plug it into our function, which means we'd have 2 times -1 plus 1. And we would get out, so f of -1 is -1. So if we're going to do the same thing, we're going to plug in 0. So f of 0 is 2 times 0 plus 1. So f of 0 is 1. Here we have f of 1 is 2 times 1 plus 1. And we get f of 1 is 3. We can do the same thing here. We got f of 2 take the 2, we plug it in, is 2 times 2 plus 1. So f of 2 is 5. Okay? So that's the basic idea there. So the input is your x-coordinate or domain values. Remember when we watched this video, the little chicks go into the machine. And your output is what you get out after we've applied the function. Okay? And our input is always called domain. Our output is always called range. Okay, so here we're going to have an input and we're going to get an output. And I'm just going to pick 4 values. I'm going to pick, you guessed it, -1, 0, 1, and 2. So here, I'm going to take wherever x is. So this is going to be, it's f of x. So we're going to apply the function x squared plus 3. So f of -1 is -1 squared plus 3. So f of -1 is 4. So remember, these are all my x values. These are all my f of x values, or my y values. So now if I do f of 0 equals 0 squared plus 3, f of 0 is 3. Then if I do f of 1, I get 1 squared plus 3. So f of 1 is equal to 4. If I do f of 2 equals 2 squared plus 3, I get f of 2 equals 7. Alright, we're going to do one more of these. So our function is now -1/3 x plus 1. And we're getting out g of x this time. And I'm going to pick my x values. This will be g of x. And again, I'm picking -1. Actually, I'm going to pick different numbers. I'm going to pick -3, 0, 3, 1. I'm picking 3's because it's 1/3. If I pick multiples of 3's, this will work out better. Not 1, 6. So if I plug in -3, this is -1/3 times -3 plus 1. This is g of -3. So g of -3 is, let's see, that's -1 plus 1, 0. So let's find out what g of 0 is now. So I'm going to do -1/3 times 0 plus 1. So g of 0 is 1. So if I do g of 3, I get -1/3 times 3 plus 1. This is the one. So g of 3 equals 0. I messed up. This is -1/3 times -3 plus 1. This gives me 2, not 0. Then if I do g of 6, I get -1/3 times 6 plus 1, and I get g of 6 equals -1. Okay? So that's all a function is. You're taking your input, you're plugging it in, you have an output. So let's evaluate functions. So that just means we're going to take our value and we're going to plug it in. Notice this says h of 3. So we're going to go to my h function and I'm going to plug in 3. So I've got h of 3 is equal to 5 times 3 minus 3 squared. So I can type this into my calculator, or I can do it by hand, piece by piece. This would be 15 minus 9, because 3 squared is 3 times 3. And 15 minus 9 is 6. Okay, so h of 3 equals 6. Let's try g of -1. So first off, g of -1 means I'm going to pull my g function. So g of -1 is 3 times -1 squared. So g of -1 is 3 times 1, and g of -1 is just 3. Alright? Okay, let's try some more. So notice that this one says f of -5, so we need to go to our f function. we're going to plug in negative 5. So I've got 3 times negative 5 plus 1. And again, I can use a calculator, or you can do it by hand like I'm doing. So you've got f of negative 5 equals negative 15 plus 1. So f of negative 5 equals negative 14. That wasn't too bad. So let's look at g of 4 now. So here's my g of x. I'm going to plug in 4 everywhere I see an x. So this is going to be 3 times 4 squared. So g of 4 equals 3 times 16. So g of 4 equals 48. Okay, I now want you guys to go ahead and try this one out on your own.